is the 8-sequence method, or 8-sequence outlining, whatever you would like to call it? It is originally a screenwriting technique, I believe, but it is essentially a storytelling technique, so it works fantastic for novels. I'm going to link some resources below to how other people use it and how they've adapted it for what they're working on, and this is purely my own adaptation of what I've seen people use it for from a screenwriting perspective, then to how I'm using it to write novels. One of the coolest things about this method is that it is extremely adaptable. So you really can tailor it to how it would work best for you. You do not need to do anyone else's methods, including this one. So take what works for you, leave what doesn't, and have fun experimenting. I use it so that each of the 8 sequences are the same length, essentially. They are about 12.5% of the book. And I didn't get that number from nowhere. I got that from K.M. Weiland's book, Structuring Your Novel. That's how she lays out the 8 major beats, the way that she talks about them, and I really liked her justification for why that is. It made a lot of sense to me, so that's how I have done it as well. So I'm gonna pop on the screen my graphic that I made, because I think visualization for something like this is so helpful. So again, this is how I've adapted it. You do not need to do it this way. I don't think there's a correct or incorrect way to use it. Let's get into it. Sequence 1, I'd like to call that Normal Life Interrupted. That's the first 12.5% of the book. In a 90,000 word novel, it's about 11,500 words. It takes the story from the beginning, the hook, through to the inciting event playing out. The plot focus is on setting up the status quo for the protagonist so readers can understand why the inciting event is such a big deal and what the protagonist stands to lose by getting involved in it. The character arc focus is on setting up the protagonist's weaknesses and the lie they believe that will be challenged by the rest of the book. I like to use scaffolding scenes, so each sequence has 5 scaffolding scenes that I use that really helps connect each beat to the next beat, encouraging causality when brainstorming. So that first scene is going to be the setup of the sequence, and it happens that this is also the setup of the book because it's the first scene in the first sequence. So you have the setup, and then at the end of the sequence, that's the climax of the first sequence, so it's the inciting event of the book playing out. But you have an inciting event of the first sequence, which is going to be some sort of problem or action that the character takes that will lead to them being wherever they need to be or doing whatever they need to do at the inciting event. In the middle of the first sequence, you've got that midpoint scene, and whatever they do at that midpoint scene, whether it's an action they take or a decision they make, that's going to lead to the inevitable scene of the first sequence, which is going to be usually inevitable because of the weaknesses or the lie that the character believes. And then that inevitable scene will domino into the climax, the inciting event. And the inciting event is a problem that is impossible to ignore. Sequence 2, I call that the debate and choice. It's the second 12.5% of the book, ending at 25% into the book. In a 90,000 word novel, that would bring you from 11,501 words into the novel to 23,000 words into the novel. And obviously you don't need to be like to the word, and you don't have to do this anyways. This is just how I do it. But it's just to keep in mind that you want each section to be reasonably equal because of pacing. So sequence 2 takes the story from the fallout of the inciting event just playing out through to the break into 2, or the door of no return, whatever you would like to call it, where the protagonist's story goal is set. The plot focus is on how the inciting event has thrown the protagonist's life into upheaval. They've received the call to action, but they reject it. They face a debate over how to proceed, usually clinging to the status quo until they're forced to admit that the status quo is gone forever. This prompts their choice over what to do, solidifying their story goal. The character arc focus is on how the protagonist's weaknesses and the lie they believe make them ill-equipped to handle the situation that the inciting event creates. And again, you have those scaffolding scenes. All of it is the same, except for the climax of sequence 2 is going to be the door of no return, the break into 2, whatever that scene is, playing out. Sequence 3, the initial plan. It's the third 12.5% of the book, ending at 37.5%. In a 90,000 word novel, that would bring you from about 23,001 words to 33,750 words. Sequence 3 takes the story from that commitment to their story goal, just having played out, through to the first reminder of the stakes, where they encounter the first real obstacle and raising of the stakes, and often the opposition shows its superior capabilities and highlights the protagonist's weaknesses. The plot focus is on how the protagonist begins trying to achieve the story goal they have just committed to. They develop a plan and begin taking steps toward it while encountering obstacles from their opponent and their own inexperience. The character arc focus is on how the protagonist interacts with an upside-down world without fundamentally changing who they are. Their lie is being challenged, which is a threat to their identity. This makes them double down on justifying its validity. Again, you have the 5 scaffolding scenes: a setup, an inciting event, a midpoint, an inevitable scene, and then the climax of the 3rd sequence, which is that reminder of the stakes scene playing out. The 4th sequence is learning necessary information. It's that 4th 12.5% of the book, ending at 50%. In a 90,000 word novel, that would be from about 33,751 words to 45,000 words. Sequence 4 takes the story from the stakes having just been raised at that first reminder of the stakes through to the midpoint pivot. The plot focus is on the steps the protagonist takes to achieve their goal and the information they learn while dealing with the obstacles the opponent puts in their way. Just before the midpoint pivot, a plot revelation leads the protagonist to experience a mirror moment. The character arc focus is on how their lie is being attacked and they are slowly beginning to question it. When they experience the mirror moment, they're forced to admit to themselves that their lie is, in fact, a lie, and they get their first glimpse of the truth. Again, you have the scaffolding scenes. There is a setup, an inciting event, a midpoint, an inevitable scene, and then the climax of that 4th sequence is the midpoint pivot scene playing out. The 5th sequence, a focused plan. The 5th 12.5% of the book, ending at 62.5%. In a 90,000 word novel, it's about 45,001 words to 56,250 words. Sequence 5 takes the story from the plot revelation and the character arc revelation of the midpoint pivot through to the 2nd reminder of the stakes, where there's foreshadowing the inevitable choice and raising the stakes. The opposition usually showcases its superior capabilities and takes advantage of the protagonist's weakness. The plot focus is on how the plot revelation they just learned helps them form a more effective plan on how to achieve the story goal. But as they enact this plan, they face increased risk, higher stakes if they fail, and more serious attacks from the opponent. The character arc focus is on how their first glimpse of the truth at the mirror moment threatens their sense of self. Even though they now recognize their lie as a lie, it's an essential part of themselves, and if they reject it, who are they? To fully accept the truth means becoming someone else. Again, those scaffolding scenes, a setup, an inciting event of the sequence, a midpoint of the sequence, an inevitable scene of the sequence, and the climax of the sequence, that 2nd reminder of the stakes playing out. The 6th sequence, a false victory. That 6th 12.5% of the book, ending at 75%. In a 90,000 word novel, that would be about 56,251 words into the novel through to 67,500 words. Sequence 6 takes the story from that 2nd reminder of the stakes playing out through to the plot event that forces the protagonist into making the inevitable choice. The plot focus is on how the protagonist is using their more effective plan to achieve the story goal, but the opponent is meeting them step for step, and victory looks more and more out of reach. The plot is pushing the protagonist towards a situation that will force them to either fully reject the lie or fully reject the truth in order to achieve the story goal. It will require them to make a choice. The character arc focus is on their continued agony between identifying with the lie or the truth. Inevitably, they have to sacrifice the truth they have been learning in order to, they believe, achieve the story goal. Again, you have those same 5 scaffolding scenes, a setup, an inciting event, a midpoint, an inevitable scene, and the climax of the 6th sequence, which is that inevitable choice playing out. Sequence 7, hitting rock bottom. And this is where I differ from screenwriting. Usually in screenwriting, the 7th sequence is where they have the climax playing out. I don't. I like the 8 equal pieces of the book, so this is what I do. This is that 7th 12.5% of the book, ending at 87.5%. In a 90,000 word novel, that's 67,501 words into the manuscript through to 78,750 words. Sequence 7 takes the story from the inevitable choice having played out through to the realization that pulls them out of the all is lost and sets the dominoes of the climactic sequence into motion. The plot focus is on how the story goal is more impossible than ever before because of their actions. This is the all is lost. The plot delivers as many punches here as it needs to in order to force the protagonists to realize, whatever they still haven't learned, that they must know in order to be successful. The character arc focus is on how they are suffering now, directly because they've rejected the truth they had been learning. The realization is a self-revelation that occurs when they fully reject the lie and fully embrace the truth. Again, you have those 5 scaffolding scenes, ending in the climax of Sequence 7, which is that self-revelation, realization. Sequence 8. This is the 8th 12.5% of the book, ending at 100%. So in a 90,000 word novel, that takes it from 78,751 words into the manuscript through to 90,000 words. Sequence 8 takes the story from the realization having played out through the climax and ends with the new equilibrium. The plot focus is on the climactic sequence playing out, the final confrontation with the opponent, the climactic choice that all the way through the book up until now they were unable to make, and then what their life looks like after the story goal is achieved or failed. The character arc focus is on how the self-revelation they just had at the realization has enabled them to be successful in achieving the story goal, and how it has fulfilled their internal need and made their life better. Again, you have those 5 scaffolding scenes, but this is a little bit different because it is the end of the book. So you have the setup of the 8th sequence, and then the inciting event of the 8th sequence is usually the beginning of the climactic sequence, the midpoint of the 8th sequence, and then the inevitable scene is typically where the climactic choice is made that decides their success or failure in terms of achieving their story goal. And the climax of the 8th sequence is actually going to be the end of the book, the new equilibrium. So here's what my little graphic looks like with everything there. This is how I'm currently using it. You do not need to use the 8 sequence method this way. As you can see from the other resources that I will list below, people do whatever they would like. I actually write mostly dual point of view romance novels. So this, how I relayed how the plot event plays out and the character arc stuff is very generic, but you can really flavor what happens in each sequence by the genre you're writing. Like if you're writing a mystery novel, obviously at the beginning you need to have like, oh, here's the crime, probably that's the inciting event or whatever, who knows. And in romance, you would have very different expectations during each of those sequences. If anyone's interested, I would be happy to make a follow-up video on how I use it while writing dual point of view romance novels. One of the things that's a classic staple of the romance genre is that both the protagonist and the love interest have a character arc, and I really like the way that using the 8 sequence method really facilitates how you can have that play out. Perhaps that's a little vague. If you're curious, let me know and I'll make another video. Thanks for hanging out. That's how I use the 8 sequence method. I talk about it all the time in my vlogs. My name is CF Claire, by the way. I'm planning to be a self-published Kindle Unlimited romance novel author. And if you're curious, I do a lot of vlogging and writing goals videos. I do really like talking about writing craft, and so I do have a growing, slowly growing selection of videos on craft. If you use the 8 sequence method, I would love to hear how you use it, where you heard about it, if you are writing a novel or a screenplay, your favorite things about it, how you've adapted it. But I hope that your writing is going great, you're doing great, and I will see you in the next video.